Today is a very special episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast. We are doing our first book club review episode for the last 3.5-ish weeks. A bunch of people in the Discord and maybe you as well on the Home Studio Hangout podcast have been reading Make Your Own Rules by Andrew Huang, by YouTuber creator and music producer Andrew Huang. And in this podcast episode, I'm going to go through a couple quotes and takeaways that I got from the book. And I'm going to read from our Discord a couple of things that you guys have gotten out of it. Let's get into it. So welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. I am your host, Drew. As you can see, and I think I shot in here last week as well, I'm in a new spot. My studio looks different. We have recently gotten our floors done in our house, and we swapped the rooms that our bedroom and my recording studio was in. And so the last couple weeks have been like really crazy with trying to get all this stuff situated, but yeah, we're back at it, ready to go. Hopefully, trying to get some really great interviews scheduled for the next handful of weeks throughout February, trying to bring some awesome friends either back or some new guests on. Really pumped about it, and I hope you guys are going to be excited for that as well. But today's episode, we're going to go through a couple of my takeaways from Make Your Own Rules by Andrew Huang. We've been reading that for our book club book, and I'm really excited as well to talk about the next month's book club book in this episode. I'm just going to give 3 takeaways that and quotes that I have thought were really interesting from this book. If you're listening to this and you don't know or you didn't read the book and you have no clue who Andrew Huang is a YouTuber, music producer, songwriter, creator of things, now plugin developer in collaboration with a bunch of different companies, namely Baby Audio for his transit plugin. He's taught some courses on music production and being creative and all that stuff, and now he's a book author and has this book, Make Your Own Rules. It essentially follows his life, so it is part biography, part technical handbook manual. I really enjoyed it for both sides of it, mainly because I'm interested in him as well. But it's kind of a 2-part thing, and I think anybody who's trying to do the music thing can really get a lot from this book. So if you're listening to this and you haven't read it, would highly recommend picking it up and read it again on your own time. We follow him kind of getting started in music. He even talks about some of the early aspects of that stuff and what it's like growing up in Canada in the late 90s, early 2000s, and kind of coming into his own after college and going to college for music and kind of what he learned at, I believe it was York University, and what he learned there, how he actually applied a lot of that stuff that was really interesting. But also the navigation of him being Chinese Canadian and coming from like an immigrant family. And that was also super, super interesting because I'm a big listener of his content, and like really outside of this book, it's not really something that he's talked about a whole lot in any of his stuff. So I found that really interesting as well. But yeah, you go through that and it kind of takes you through his journey of starting on YouTube, getting, a lot of views on YouTube, and then also at the same time growing this like song creation business that wasn't really tied to YouTube, but then eventually became tied to YouTube. And now he's doing a lot of brand stuff and brand work and things like that has been really, really cool. For those of you that have read the book, this is nothing new to you. This is, what you read. But for those that haven't read it, just wanted to get some context on what has been happening in the book so that you have a little bit more of what we're talking about. But so the first quote, and this is one I really, really liked, is, "By aiming for quantity, you force yourself to make bold decisions and move on. quantity can be measured. You know when you're hitting your goals. And usually the more quantity there is, the more quality there will be. And this is him talking about the quantity versus quality argument. And funnily enough, I read this book last year and then again this month with everybody else. And this book said that, and then a few months later, I actually heard Alex Hormozi say a very similar thing about content creation or really doing anything with business or music making or art or anything really creative, which is it's not quantity or quality. It's quality because of quantity, or quantity begets quality, which I find really interesting. The argument is that you only get good by repetition. So you want as much repetition as you can get with, this is the notable like caveat. You want as much repetition as you can get with small tweaks to try to get better. It's the atomic habits rule. It's the 1% every day rule. Most people have heard some form of that advice. But when kind of focusing it into a creative area, I find that really, really interesting, because most people are like, oh, it's my creative work. I want it to be as good as you can. And you should try to make it as good as you can. But you should try to do as much of it as quickly as you can as well, so that you can get feedback from people and see what's working and what's not, and then iterate over and over and over again on trying to get better and getting that feedback. Obviously, make the things that you do put out as good as you can be, but don't let the cyclical knob tweaking or rewriting the line a million times when it was probably fine to begin with get you lost in this really long thing of not putting stuff out or not releasing things or not trying something. So yeah, that was a really good quote, and it's funny that I've heard that from Andrew Huang first, and then started hearing a lot of other people say very similar things in different areas of videos or podcasts or whatnot. But I think the quantity over quality argument is not really an argument anymore. I think it's like I said, I think it's a quantity begets quality, using quantity or output, if you will, to get better, using the consistent output of stuff, of whatever you're doing, music, mixing, songwriting, whatever, to then iterate upon and find your quality. From a songwriting perspective, also, like Ed Sheeran says this, it's you have to write a crap ton of songs to get to the good. You have to write a crap ton of bad songs to get to the good songs. You have to run, like songwriting is like, I think Jonathan Wright said this on our episode with him when we chatted about this. It's like a dirty faucet, right? You have to run it for a little while, get all the gunk out, get all the crap out until you finally get like good usable water, and eventually it clears itself out. But up front, it's going to be gross and it's not going to be very good, which I can attest to that, honestly. Even like for podcasting, Josh will attest to this as well, as like our podcasts up front. There are episodes that weren't great that I think we put out in the beginning that we thought were great, and then I went back and looked at them. I was like, we could do this better. There are things about our video. There are things about my editing. There are things about the thumbnails that we chose. There are things about, the mixes that I've done. There are things about drum bus choices or lyric choices or synth choices that just, I go back and listen to some stuff and I was like, man, you were really trying. But you missed the mark a little bit, young Andrew. So, but yeah, Great quote for a first one. The second one that I wrote down, and I have it on my computer right here. Luck plays a huge role in whether you get recognition for your work or not. For me, and this is, I don't know, I find this really interesting because for me, this quote actually means a lot, because obviously there's like the idea of create your own luck, give yourself the most chances, the most opportunities to succeed or get placed in a lucky position. Sure. But when it comes down to it, something does have to go right in order for you to get recognition. For me, for instance, like I tried for years to get stuff going on the music production side of things, and I just so happened to meet and get introduced to my friend Shama, who I've talked about plenty, and I did the VeggieTales stuff with. And even in that, we had to get lucky that the song was good and the video was good and people actually cared and wanted, and like we tried our hardest and did our best of what we could control. But there was like definitely like a 10 or 5% luck factor that played into making it successful. And it's good to see somebody else say this. It's good to see somebody else like this kind of far along in their journey, this successful in their journey, in my opinion, say this, because it's something that I have inherently felt and not been able to really like. It's hard for me as somebody who's like made it in the sense of like this is what I do for a living, but not made it in the sense of like the broader industry, we'll say, of like, you know, it's not luck, it's hard work, is what a lot of people would say. And I'd say it's hard work, but luck definitely plays, you know, like he says, luck plays a huge role in whether you actually get recognition. You can work super hard, you can make good stuff. It just might not be what people want to listen to right then. Or it might not just be what, you know, the style is, or you might be dated at that point, you know. You might be making incredible stuff, but it's 80s hair metal and we're in 2015. And some people just don't care about that. And then some people do, and that's great. And you can find your own thing, but the recognition that you're going to get is not going to be as large as, you know, whether you happen to be making the thing that's in the general zeitgeist of the whole of the industry or what's popular at that point. Or being the new wave of the thing. You know, there's no way you could have known that the 1975 doing the sound that they did at the time that they did was going to be as popular, coming from very like emo backgrounds as they were, emo rock and scene backgrounds, and making like guitar-based pop music wasn't really a thing that people were asking for, yet it's huge. So there was some luck and timing there for them as well. But I will say, obviously, it's not 100% luck. You do have to, I think it's 80% work and like 20% luck, or maybe 90-10. I'm not 100% sure about those, you know, differences, but I think that there's definitely some semblance of luck, and it's good to know, like I said, from somebody at the top, that it's like, yeah, I definitely got lucky and I had to get lucky. I was working with the hand that I was dealt. So I wasn't necessarily doing things any different than a lot of people. He probably had people around him. I think he even says this in the book. There were a lot of people that were making really, really great stuff, and he was actually jealous of, like, in the avant-garde music space of like, creating like real art, you know, quote unquote real art as he perceived it, and at that time. And I think that it's very interesting to see, like, oh yeah, there were a lot of people even in Andrew Huang's life that he thought were way further along or, making better stuff. And yet a lot of those people probably aren't around and don't have a career longevity like he might, because he happened to dive into YouTube at a time when the internet was super young and video on the internet was extremely young, and YouTube itself hadn't even been bought by Google at that point, I don't think. And it's one of those things that's like right time, right place. There's a luck factor there. So I think that is huge. And like I said, it's good to hear from somebody at the higher levels that luck does actually play a factor, and it's not just hard work and meeting the right and being friends with people. That you do have to do those things. 80% hard work, 10% who 10% a little bit of luck, something like that. That's what makes you have, a large career getting recognition for your work. And kind of in this same thing, it's the third quote I want to bring up is this one that says, opportunities can come surprisingly fast and in abundance. And it's a testament to the unpredictability of this industry that we're in, to be honest. It's true that I feel like, and a lot of people will probably say this, and even if you go back to like past episodes that you've listened to me talk with other people on, it's been very much, it's slow moving, but when it hits fast and it hits hard, and you got to be ready. You got to be ready to say yes. You got to be ready to go. You got to be ready to get after it as much as you possibly can. And I mean, even in my career, my much smaller career, I kind of see that in the same way. We had a year with me and Shama, we had probably a 2-year run from 2017 to 2019 pre-COVID, where we were crushing online and we were crushing on the music side of things. I mean, and we're still doing great. Like, I have a much stronger career at this point, and Shama's got a much, follower count wise and reach wise, we're still doing crazy good stuff. But long form wise, we're not doing quite as much. And there was this 2-year span where we would drop something and it would hit 1 million almost instantly. We would drop another thing, and then it was 2 million. I think the first thing we dropped, he said this on a podcast episode that I watched of him recently, was the first thing we dropped was that Chick-fil-A song, and it's 1 million overnight. Oh, that's crazy. And then, or in the first week, and then we dropped the next thing, and it's 5 million in the first week, and that's crazy. And after that, it's just another, and we felt like we couldn't lose, and we worked as quickly as we could to get as much out while we were hot at that point. And because I have to say that because we did that, we saw the opportunity and we worked hard, we pushed hard. We were able to actually create some jobs for ourselves, which is pretty dope. But then even on the opposite end of that, of things that have happened to me or, other people on the other side, you'll see that you'll get an opportunity. Because of that opportunity, you get another opportunity. And because of that opportunity, you get another opportunity. You get 5 different opportunities. And it's say yes, move, do the best you can. Say yes, move, do the best you can. Try to capitalize as much as you can in that short amount of time. Because you're going to get, the more you do well in the limelight, the better you're going to get. And the more opportunities you're going to get because of that. So yeah, I found that really true. It is on the other side of the quote, which is opportunities can come surprisingly fast and in abundance. They also won't come for a long time, and it's going to be really slow and sparse for a long time. And like that's just how the industry works. There's a lot of other really great quotes that I have written down. Those were just like the three that I really like resonated with, just because they resonated with my like personal experience. Whoops. And there's a lot of other things talking about, embracing unique experiences and perspectives, and he celebrates diversity, and talking about how, each person has a distinct background that contributes to their individual creative process, but also that's what makes them unique and good, which I think is really, really cool. And he's one of the first people that I've seen who really shows that like you can be a decent musician. I mean, he's a great musician, but like he talks about it in the book. He lost his hearing super early, and I mean, what a setback. He can't hear a lot of frequencies out of one ear, and then like they're offset, and it's really a strange scenario for some of the stuff that he's got to go through with like his hearing loss, which also just changes like how he mixes. Most probably takes a lot longer, a lot of different references, or money, because he has to pay other people to do some of that stuff. He does a lot of collaborative work, which is probably really good for like his specific situation. Lets him just be super creative and less slightly analytical on some of that stuff. But being able to preach consistency and overcoming the obstacles, it's like, what in a music related field or an audio related field, there's almost no harder thing to overcome than hearing loss, because that is kind of the whole field. So it's pretty amazing the things that he's been able to do, and the timeline of that lines up. That he lost his hearing, it seems like before he even started his YouTube channel, doing music for people and all that stuff. And so he's just had it the whole time. It's not a thing that like he got successful and then he lost his hearing and he was already successful at that point. It really seems like, from the timeline that I can piece together, that it was something that he did, something that happened to him early on in his, musical career, somewhere around college, before he started all of the YouTube things. So I just wanted to touch on that because I found that like really, honestly, really inspiring and pretty amazing. So those were my three quotes and takeaways from the book that I really enjoyed, that really impacted me. Let's hit a couple from the Discord. So if you don't know, we have a Discord. It's called the ASHH Private Room, Home Studio Hangout Private Room. We have a book club tab, and I had a bunch of people reading along with us. A couple of people gave us their thoughts, one of which is co-host Josh. So I'm going to read Josh's first. Josh has a very specific perspective, and we're going to talk about it. So Josh says, have many thoughts. I think I disagree with a lot of his stance on needing to be visible to be profitable. Obviously, that's going to be the worldview of anyone who found success in YouTube. He has a little section where it's like a checklist to not suck, and he had a huge emphasis on the portfolio. While I think it's important, it's not how you're going to get hired unless it's a corporate gig. I love the bits about him doubling down when being offered a job at Google, which was a really, really cool story. Yes, I 100% agree with that. And it was cool hearing the same guidelines from him on how actually trying and saying you're trying are different and show very different results. There's a bunch that I loved about the stories that he was telling. His stories were crazy cool. He got offered this job at Google early on in his YouTube career when he was super successful for like a lot of money, and he turned it down. It was crazy. But so I tend to disagree with Josh on a lot of some of this stuff when it comes to Josh is not a very like visibility preference person, and obviously I'm the guy on the video doing the podcast, so I am more of a visibility. I think people should be more visible, and the industry at large, for the artists at least, generally say you need to be super visible to start garnering your own following and all that kind of stuff. They want to see that you have a following before you get signed or anything like that, and it's kind of the only way. But needing to be visible to be profitable, I would actually agree with Josh on this. I don't think you need to be highly visible to be profitable. I think you need to be smart, because profitability is like relative, right? It's, as long as I can pay my bills and have money left over at the end of the month after I pay my bills, feed myself and my family, and pay for the business to run, that is profitable. You don't necessarily have to be like a hyper visible person to be profitable in that way. Now, if you're talking about like the scale of what Andrew Huang is trying to do, or if you're talking about like, trying to be like an internet person, or it also can depend on what your goal is, but trying to be an internet person, yeah, obviously you're going to have to be visible. You're going to have to do something that's like this podcast or a YouTube channel like Andrew Huang or myself, or like content, like short form content stuff, or, or going and playing live, which not everybody wants to do. So still being, I would argue that is still being visible. I tend to disagree with Josh on his visibility stuff, but I actually very much agree with Josh on that stance of you don't necessarily have to be. It's not a requirement that you be visible in order to be profitable. Now, is it easier? Probably. There are ways that you can not be visible. There are plenty of people who you have no idea, and they just have pub deals and write songs all day, and they have no visibility when it comes to social media. There's some on the Studio 101 podcast, which we've aired a couple episodes on this show coming out. There's some people that have probably like 100 number ones that are songwriters that you have no clue who they are, and they have like 1,000 followers on Instagram, and they're not very well known. They have no YouTube channel. They have little to no online presence, and they are extremely profitable from like a business perspective, at the level of Andrew Huang or higher. But it also can depend on, and I think this is what I said to Josh, it very much depends on the goal, like your personal goals of what you're trying to achieve. Like if you're trying to be a songwriter, I think making content might be fine, but it's actually going to be more beneficial for you to get in rooms with people. Now, how you get in those rooms can depend on potentially content, but also like connections that you just make, or writing good songs and showing them to people. I tend to disagree with Josh on the portfolio piece, mainly because I believe in having a really strong portfolio, and I tend to have a huge emphasis on portfolio because portfolio is what has gotten me a lot of work. And same for Andrew Huang. It was the reason he got a lot of work. But shouts to Josh. Josh has, great label projects under his belt at this point, and doesn't have like a massive, or, he's got a strong small portfolio. He's got like a good, fine portfolio, but at the same time, it's not what he's after. He's trying to do like a very different thing. He's got very different goals. So, it's like it can be done a bunch of different ways. I just find that, and the reason I really wanted to read this book was I find that the music YouTuber content creator route just doesn't get talked about in like this much in depth before, and I found it really interesting. So yeah, shout out to Josh for that comment. I disagreed and agreed with some of that, but I think there's a lot of really good stuff in, like, he lays out a lot of guidelines, and there's some, like Josh said, there was some tough love in some of these chapters where how he says how actually trying and saying you're trying are very, very different and show different results. And, like actually trying you will see those results versus like just talking about it a lot. So yeah, there was some tough love in that book. Thanks for Josh for shouting that out, because I definitely forgot about that part. That was really good. And then the other person I wanted to do a shout out for from the Discord is Brent. Brent dropped a comment and said, I was originally more excited to read the practical stuff more so than the autobiography sections, but surprisingly, the latter ended up resonating with me more. The whole chapter around uniqueness for its own sake is usually empty of substance was a great way to put into words something I've felt for a while. Even though I know it's true, I do sometimes find myself fighting off thoughts like, this resembles something that's already been done, so I don't know if I want to try it, or this has to be unique no matter what. So that whole section was great. Make your own rules, reminder, overall solid read. Yeah, thanks, Brent. That was a gut check for me too when I read that section. Because I believe it's like a chapter, and then where he talks specifically about like uniqueness, especially in music or creativity in general, because he talks a lot about creativity, broadly. And he has one specific chapter about uniqueness or creative, like being creatively unique. And then like he kind of smatters it in here and there with like some other topics as well, kind of throughout the rest of the book. And the quote that Brent talked about, uniqueness for its own sake is usually empty of substance, is like what a check for you listening right now, but also like for me just like reading that. And it's a gut check to say, why am I wanting to be unique? Or is what I'm making just fine? And it's because it's what I want to make. Is what I'm making what I want to make? And if it's what I want to make, then that's all that matters, really. That's unique to me because it's my take on this thing. It doesn't matter if it's something that other people have done before. It doesn't matter that it resembles something that's already been done. Or it has to be so incredibly unique or so incredibly separate from, whatever thing that it's related to. I think that as long as you're enjoying it and it's what you truly want to make, and being honest with yourself about what you actually want to make, and not doing the other side of that as well, and like clout chasing based on sound or based on whatever, not doing that side, but also not being unique for the sake of being, creatively unique, and just making the thing that you want to make somewhere in the middle where it's, sure, it might sound like something, but it's also unique in the way that like your take is on it. And so, yeah, I even responded in the Discord that said acceptance that most things aren't truly unique can definitely help you get past a lot when it comes to creative work. That part hit me as well whenever I was reading that. So thanks to those guys for dropping in the Discord. If you want to check it out, the Discord will be a link. There will be a link in the description for the Discord. Join us, come hang out, come read books with us. It's super cool. The last and final thing I want to talk about is what book are we going to do for next month? And I need to go grab it real quick. So for next month's, I have had this book sitting on my shelf for a while, and I've been trying to find an excuse to read it. It's really short. It is about 150 pages. It is incredibly short, especially when I'm currently in the middle of reading Stormlight Archive books by Brandon Sanderson, and each of those are like 1,000+ pages, and it's like these big high fantasy books. So 150 books is incredibly short, but I know I wanted to make sure that everybody that listens to the podcast had a chance to read this one, because I feel like it's going to be really interesting. Whether you're a mix engineer, whether you're a producer, but mainly if you're a songwriter, I've been trying to find a good book on songwriting. And I found this book, it got recommended, and I want to try reading How to Write One Song by Jeff Tweedy. Jeff Tweedy is the songwriter and a singer and primary songwriter for the band Wilco. They write some super cool music. He's also a big songwriter in the Americana kind of rock space. He's also in a couple other bands. I think he also has some interesting like solo stuff. So he very much has like a view on songwriting, and he is like pretty highly regarded as a really great songwriter and record producer. So wanted to give this one a shot. It's only 150 pages. I have not read this one yet, so I would love to make sure that we check this one out together. Here, let's get it in frame. How to Write One Song by Jeff Tweedy. There is an audiobook version. I will leave a link to this book on Amazon if you want to grab it, or if you have a Kindle, I'll link you can grab the Kindle version there too as well. It seems like a really cool book. Got it recommended to me by a bunch of different people. So I feel like it's going to be a good one to read together. And even if you're a mix engineer or producer and you're not songwriting, I think it's going to be good to learn more about the songwriting process so that you can help make creative decisions that serve the song itself and not just being hyper analytical. We talk about that sometimes here on the podcast, where sometimes mixing can be hyper analytical and like I'm doing this specific thing instead of trying to serve the song better and trying to serve like what the song is about and all of that kind of stuff better. So let's take a dive into songwriting with How to Write One Song with Jeff Tweedy. And that, my friends, is going to be the end of the first book club episode of the podcast. I'm very excited to have done this. Pumped to do the next one. I'm very excited about that book. Thank you so much for listening. Go ahead and share. If you think somebody would enjoy this type of thing, go ahead and share this with a friend, either the episode or drop a comment and tag them if you're on YouTube, or if this gets posted on Instagram, we'll tag them there as well. So very excited about reading this one. And yeah, thank you so much for coming to listen to the podcast. Super grateful for all of you guys. And yeah, let's enjoy this next book over the next month together. And we will do it all again next month. I'm very pumped. All right. We'll see you guys later next week with another episode.